Hi, welcome to the Chris and Shane Show. We hope that you all had a very pleasant holiday, and welcome back to our program. Today we want to talk about one of the biggest events of the holiday. This, of course, was the attempted attack on Northwest Flight 253 to Detroit by one Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib, a radicalized Nigerian. Now, the striking thing about this attack is not that it occurred, but the manner in which it occurred. Because we should have known about this attack ahead of time. We should have never let this guy board the flight, and everyone involved knows it. There were repeated failures from the intelligence individuals who were working at the Nigerian embassy all the way up to the airport screeners. This never should have happened, yet it did. And American people are, and they should be, outraged that 8 years after September 11th, this kind of systemic failure can continue to occur. And somebody, I don't know exactly who, I think Shane and I will differ on this, needs to be held accountable.
I agree. I think Obama should immediately tender his resignation to the American people, and also I think Bush should retroactively tender his resignation for not stopping the September 11th terrorist attacks, which killed 3,000 Americans. But barring that, let's deal with the people who are actually responsible for what I agree is a systemic failure. This is a problem, and I am actually outraged, probably at different people than Chris. Intelligence, total failure. Intelligence community bears the brunt of the responsibility on this, and like Chris alluded to, there's no excuse for not tracking this guy and having him on a do not fly list. My understanding is he was actually on a terrorist watch list, but still allowed to fly into the United States. That should never happen. The people responsible for that need to be dealt with. And I think right now what you see from the Obama administration is they do take this seriously, and they are doing very deep reviews into who is responsible, and those people will be held accountable.
Let's look at some of the facts of what occurred on that day as we try to figure out who should be held responsible. And I'm not suggesting that Barack Obama himself is accountable, but maybe some of the people that work for him are. At 3 a.m. Hawaii time is when this attack occurred, roughly, and when we knew about it as the federal government. His staffers chose to not wake him up. They're like, his scheduled wake-up time is 6 a.m., and an attempted terrorist attack on American soil is not important enough for us to interrupt the commander-in-chief's sleep. For shame on those staffers. I can't hold Barack Obama responsible for what they did. He was asleep. But for shame on those staffers. And I ask the question is, what kind of people does Barack Obama have working for him in the National Security Council and his national security advisors? What kind of people did he put in position to make these decisions to where they don't even wake him up when there's an attack on the American people? I think you have to point the finger at his chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel.
I think his chief of staff will be chastised for that, because I agree there's no excuse for not having an incident like this be cause for waking the president up. And I think going forward, you will see that these types of incidents, because again, it wasn't clear when it had happened, what exactly had happened. I realize that, you have to take every possibility seriously. And I think what you'll see from now on is that they do. That, anything where it's still questionable what actually happened, those things will be taken much more seriously. And yes, those staffers will be told, okay, go in and wake up the president. Maybe the NSA chief, maybe the National Security Advisor, maybe he needs to be held accountable. These are serious lapses, and I think anyone with any culpability needs to be dealt with properly. And so I'm not in disagreement about that at all.
Looking at some of the other decisions, not just the ones that were made in the immediate aftermath, which I find highly disturbing, but looking at the decisions that were made and how this was handled from a public affairs standpoint, and the next couple of days is shocking to me. I mean, President Obama didn't even address the nation about this attack until 3 days after the attack already took place. And I know all the lefties will scream, well, Bush didn't talk about the shoe bomber until 6 days after the attack. But they'll recall that that was only a couple months after September 11th, and we were getting daily briefings from Donald Rumsfeld with the double-wide podium with General Myers, where they were discussing Afghanistan, the ongoing war on terror. All right, that gave people the perception, whether it was real or not, that the United States government was on the case and attacking terrorism and keeping the American people safe. Right now, that's not going on right now. And what the American people need is to see their commander-in-chief in senior executive positions saying that, we're on the case, not 3 days later, not in an informal press conference when he's not even wearing a tie.
I tend to disagree with this, because here we're getting into the realm of what should be the perception and what public relations standpoint should the administration take on issues like this? And I think what you'll see, I mean, yes, they did send out Robert Gibbs, the press secretary, White House press secretary, whose job it is to talk about these things, to discuss, what was being done. Meanwhile, Obama was internally addressing the issue immediately, began his review the next day, not 3 days later, and to quibble about whether he was wearing a tie or when he actually came forward before the cameras to make a statement, I think is to prejudge whether or not it's better to take your time to get something right, because now we're at the level of investigation versus having a hyper emotionalized atmosphere fostered by some hasty comments by the president.
I'm not saying that he needs to be hasty. And really all that he needed to do to defray this criticism is that within 24 hours of the attack, he needed to put on a suit and a tie, get in front of a camera and say, America, this is what happened. We don't know all the details right now. It looks like there may have been some failures, but I want you to know that as your commander-in-chief, we're taking a look at it right. We're taking a look at the issue right now. We're going to find out exactly what happened, and we're going to do our job to keep the American people safe. That's all he had to do. He could have done it in less than 5 minutes, just a little, real quick, walk out in front of a camera that's following him around and do it. But instead, he decided to wait 3 days later. Couldn't even put on a tie. Yeah, I understand he's on vacation, but you know what? So were a lot of those people that were attacked on that plane. And I think he could have treated them, in a formal manner, in a respectful manner. It's very odd that the President of the United States would talk about an issue of such serious gravity without even putting on a tie. It's just bizarre to me, and it's this amateur hour at the White House.
Okay, this is where I get a little bit upset at the right wing and these sort of old guard attitudes about how a president is supposed to act. I think there was one of Bush's former chiefs of staff who criticized Obama for not wearing a tie in the Oval Office and made some ridiculous statement like, you better put on a tie, talking to the President of the United States. Who are you to say that, all right? You know what? Just because there is a wardrobe difference between what you think is the most formal and what you'd like it to be, wardrobe has changed in the past 100 years. It didn't even used to be a suit and tie was the most formal thing you could wear in the past century. All right? It's only been really in the past 50 years. Things changed. Business casual is being taken up by more people and more organizations and more leaders. You don't have to get bent out of shape about whether or not he wore a tie.
There's nothing business casual about an attack on the American people. There's nothing casual about it. And it doesn't matter what the style of the day is. I'm just saying that it's indicative. It lets people criticize him for not taking the issue seriously. And it's a shame that he did so. Now, I don't know, I don't think that is lessening his response to the issue. But it's projecting an image. And you know and I know and Barack Obama knows that in the realm of politics, perception is reality. And he's allowing people to perceive him to be weak on this issue, uncaring on this issue. And that's bad for the psyche of the American people. It's bad for the airline industry. And it's not what we want from our commander-in-chief. Now, I'm not saying he needs to get up there and bluster and scream that we're going to bomb Yemen and we're going to strip search every Muslim. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that he take the issue formally and seriously to the American people in a timely manner. That's not too much to ask from our commander-in-chief.
Well, Chris, when you are already agreeing that he is taking it seriously, but you're quibbling with whether or not he's presenting the right public image, I think we're going too far afield. I think people perceive that he's not panicking, and people perceive that he's making, and he's been doing this for the past few days, an in-depth review of his intelligence personnel and the people responsible who should have been tracking this guy, who should have had him on a do-not-fly list, who should have known that he was more serious as a threat, who should have listened to the warnings from the Nigerian cabinet official who was his father, who told him that he was a terrorist and he was going to make an attack. All these things are being taken seriously. People understand that, and when you quibble about things like whether or not he's wearing a tie, you begin to look ridiculous to the American people as an opposition party. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to hurt the Republicans. I think people are taking the situation seriously. I just hope that going forward we can come to an understanding that, what people do is more important than how they look doing it. So with that, I'd like to thank you guys for listening, and hopefully we'll see you guys again on the next episode of the Chris and Shane Show.
See you in a few days, folks.